Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in Montana history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The small mining settlement of Blackwater Gulch no longer appears on modern maps of Montana territory. What remains are scattered foundation stones, rusted machinery parts, and a sealed mine entrance in a remote valley of the Bitterroot Mountains. Official records claim the settlement was abandoned due to depleted gold veins in 1877, but recently discovered documents suggest a far more troubling reality. In 1878, a U.S. Marshal's report documented the disappearance of 27 miners over a 3-month period. The mine was sealed by government order in August of that year. By September, Blackwater Gulch was empty, its buildings later dismantled for lumber or left to decay. The report concluded with a peculiar notation: further investigation not recommended due to unstable geological conditions. In 1957, historian Margaret Holloway uncovered a series of letters and journals while researching Montana's mining history at the State Archives in Helena. These documents, subsequently microfilmed and then misplaced during a building renovation in 1962, offered a glimpse into what truly occurred at Blackwater Gulch. This is that story. Winter had settled early over the Bitterroot Mountains in November 1876. Snow already blanketed the higher elevations, and the miners of Blackwater Gulch prepared for isolation. The settlement consisted of approximately 40 crude cabins, a company store, an assay office, and the entrance to the Prosperity Mine, named with the optimism characteristic of the era. Thomas Blackwood, the mine's owner, had established the operation in 1874 after discovering promising gold deposits in the quartz veins running through the mountain. By 1876, the mine employed nearly 60 men working in shifts. Blackwood's venture had proven moderately successful, though not the bonanza he had initially hoped for. The settlement maintained its tenuous existence through the harsh Montana winters by stockpiling supplies and creating a tight-knit, if not always harmonious, community. Mail delivery was irregular at best during winter months, and the nearest town of any significance, Hamilton, lay 3 days' journey away by horseback in good weather. On December 3, 1876, mine foreman William Cooper noted in his daily log, "Blasting commenced in the new northeastern tunnel. Progress slower than anticipated due to unusual density of rock formation." This seemingly mundane entry marked the beginning of what would become known as the Blackwater Incident. Cooper, a veteran of mining operations in Nevada and Colorado, had been hired by Blackwood for his experience and pragmatic approach to the dangers inherent in their profession. His log entries, preserved in the state archives, provide the most comprehensive timeline of subsequent events. 3 days after blasting began in the new tunnel, Cooper recorded, "2 men report hearing sounds similar to rushing water behind the northeast face. Inspection revealed no moisture or evidence of underground spring. Blasting continues." The entry concluded with a practical note about powder supplies and tool maintenance. According to documents recovered from the company's store ledger, the miners who reported the sounds were Michael Donovan and Frederick Jennings, both experienced men who had worked the Prosperity Mine since its second season. Donovan, age 42, had previously worked in the California goldfields before moving to Montana. Jennings, only 27, had apprenticed in Pennsylvania coal mines before seeking his fortune in the West. Both men's signatures appear on the blasting authorization forms dated December 6th, indicating they continued working despite their concerns. The northeastern tunnel represented Blackwood's most ambitious expansion of the mine. According to survey documents filed with the Territorial Mining Authority, this shaft was intended to extend nearly 400 yards into the mountain, following a promising quartz vein that assay reports suggested contained the highest gold concentration yet discovered at the site. The anticipated yield from this vein formed the basis of Blackwood's latest round of investment solicitations to Eastern financiers. The following week, December 12th, brought the first disappearance. A miner named John Farnsworth failed to emerge at the end of his shift. His work partners reported he had moved deeper into the new tunnel to retrieve a forgotten tool. Search parties explored every accessible inch of the mine for 2 days, but found no trace of Farnsworth. Farnsworth had arrived at Blackwater Gulch only 3 months earlier. According to the company employment register, he was 31 years old, unmarried, and had listed no next of kin. His personal effects, inventoried as part of the disappearance investigation, included a worn Bible, a daguerreotype of an unidentified young woman, and 1742 in currency and coins. The company's store ledger showed he had recently purchased a new pair of boots on credit against his next pay period. Cooper's log entry for December 14th reads, "Search for Farnsworth concluded. Must assume fatal accident in unexplored crevice or shaft. No body recovered." Blackwood authorizes payment of 1 month's wages to his widow. This reference to a widow contradicts the employment register, suggesting either an error in Cooper's log or that Farnsworth had misrepresented his marital status when hired. According to a letter later found among Blackwood's correspondence, the payment was actually sent to Farnsworth's sister in St. Louis, along with his personal effects. The letter, dated December 16th, expressed formal condolences while emphasizing the inherent dangers of mining work and the company's limited liability in such cases. The matter might have ended there. Mining accidents were common, and men sometimes disappeared into inaccessible areas after falls or cave-ins. However, on December 18th, Cooper noted, "Men on morning shift report tools and supplies displaced overnight in Northeast Tunnel. Night watchman Hayes saw no one enter the mine. Locks found secure." Hayes, identified in payroll records as Samuel Hayes, had been employed specifically to prevent theft of equipment and gold-bearing ore. A former Army scout, Hayes had been hired at a premium wage due to his reputation for alertness and honesty. His own statement, attached to Cooper's log, describes conducting hourly checks throughout the night of December 17th through 18th, finding the mine entrance locked and secured each time. The displaced items included 3 pickaxes, a lantern, and a coil of rope, all reported to have been properly stored in the equipment alcove near the tunnel entrance at the end of the previous shift. Morning workers found these items nearly 100 yards into the tunnel, arranged in what one miner described as too orderly to be accidental, with the pickaxes placed parallel to each other and the lantern, still containing oil but unlit, centered between them. By Christmas 1876, an uneasiness had settled over Blackwater Gulch. Cooper's log mentions men requesting transfers from the northeast tunnel to other areas of the mine. Blackwood denied most requests, citing the promising ore samples recently extracted from that section. The settlement's Christmas celebration, typically a rowdy affair according to accounts from previous years, was notably subdued. The company store had stocked extra whiskey and arranged for a fiddler to provide entertainment, but Cooper's log notes that many men retired early and consumption of spirits was well below anticipated levels. A letter from Blackwood to his brother in Boston, dated December 26th, reveals financial pressures driving his decisions. "The Eastern investors grow impatient for returns. I cannot afford work stoppage or delays based on miners' superstitions about noises in the dark. The Northeast vein shows the highest gold content yet discovered. We must pursue it with all haste." The letter continues in a more personal vein, rare for the typically business-focused correspondence between the brothers. "I must admit, Edward, that the men's unease has begun to affect me as well. Yesterday, while inspecting the new tunnel, I experienced a most peculiar sensation of being watched. The air seemed somehow thicker, resistant to movement. I attribute this to poor ventilation and the psychological effect of the men's ghost stories, but it was discomforting nonetheless. On January 3, 1877, Cooper recorded another unusual incident. Night watchman Hayes resigned position. Claims to have heard voices calling from inside sealed sections of the mine. replaced with Peterson, formerly of afternoon shift. Hayes's formal resignation letter, preserved in company records, provides more detail. I hereby tender my resignation, effective immediately. During my watch on the night of January the 2nd, I distinctly heard my name called from beyond the sealed western shaft. This shaft, as you know, was closed last season after being deemed unproductive. The voice called 3 times, each time louder, and seemed to know when I approached the sealed entrance. I have faced Apache raiders and survived the war, but I will not face whatever waits in your mountain. Hayes departed Blackwater Gulch the following morning, apparently forfeiting nearly 2 weeks of unpaid wages. According to the stage company manifest from Hamilton, he purchased passage to Helena on January 8th, and from there to Denver. No further record of his whereabouts appears in the available documentation. His replacement, Eric Peterson, was a Swedish immigrant who had worked at Prosperity Mine for 14 months. Previously employed on the afternoon shift as a cart operator, Peterson accepted the night watchman position at increased wages. The company's store ledger shows he purchased a new revolver on credit the day he assumed his new duties. The temperatures dropped severely in early January, with snow accumulating to depths that made travel beyond the settlement nearly impossible. Blackwater Gulch turned inward, its residents gathering at the company store in evenings to share whiskey and stories. According to later testimony, conversations increasingly centered on strange occurrences within the mine. A miner named Alistair McPherson kept a personal journal, excerpts of which appeared in Holloway's research. His entry from January 7th noted, "Williams says the rock face moved yesterday, not a collapse. Moved, like breathing. No one believes him, but fewer men volunteer for the Northeast Tunnel now." McPherson, 36, had worked at Blackwater Gulch since its establishment. Originally from Scotland, he had come to America in 1863 and worked various mining operations across the West. His journal, written partly in English and partly in Gaelic, provides one of the few personal perspectives on daily life in the settlement during this period. The Williams referenced was likely Robert Williams, a Welsh miner whose name appears regularly on the Northeast Tunnel work rotation. Company medical records indicate Williams visited the settlement's part-time doctor on January 8th, complaining of headaches and difficulty sleeping. The doctor prescribed laudanum and recommended lighter duties, a recommendation apparently ignored by mine management. On January 10th, 2 more miners disappeared during the same shift, brothers named Thomas and Joseph Klein. Unlike Farnsworth, they vanished from different sections of the mine, making an accident seem less likely. Cooper's log from that date indicates a 6-hour search before harsh weather conditions forced the men back to the surface. The Klein brothers had arrived at Blackwater Gulch in October 1876. According to their employment records, they were ages 24 and 26, originally from Pennsylvania. They shared a cabin at the northern edge of the settlement and were known for keeping to themselves. The company store ledger shows they regularly purchased extra candles and writing materials, though no personal writings were found among their effects after their disappearance. The following day's entry is more detailed. No sign of the Klein brothers. Men report equipment dragged toward the deeper northeastern sections, finding drag marks but no blood. Blackwood insists operations continue in all other tunnels while search proceeds. An attached statement from the search party leader, Henry Vaughn, describes finding a single boot belonging to Thomas Klein approximately 50 yards into the northeastern tunnel. The boot contained no foot or other remains, but the leather showed unusual damage, described as stretched and twisted, as if subjected to enormous pressure. The boot was reportedly kept in Blackwood's office as part of the investigation, though it does not appear on any later inventory of items removed from the settlement. By mid-January, Cooper's log entries show increasing concern about discipline and morale. Men were requesting to work in pairs or groups, even for tasks typically handled by individuals. Some refused to enter certain tunnels altogether, forfeiting a day's wages rather than venture into the deeper sections of the mine. According to payroll records, daily productivity fell by nearly 30% between January 1st and January 15th. Blackwood's correspondence with investors during this period makes no mention of these issues, instead emphasizing recent high-quality ore samples and promising imminent increases in gold production. A letter from Blackwood to his investors, dated January 19th, reveals growing tensions. Progress continues despite certain staffing challenges. The miners' superstitious nature, combined with the isolation of our position, has created some operational difficulties. However, ore quality remains exceptional, particularly from the northeastern veins. The company's store ledger from this period shows increased purchases of whiskey, tobacco, and ammunition, items often associated with stress and anxiety. The settlement had no church or formal religious leadership, but McPherson's journal mentions impromptu prayer meetings held in various cabins during the evenings. On January 23rd, Cooper recorded a significant discovery. Blasting in northeastern tunnel revealed unusual cavity approximately 30 feet beyond previous terminus. Cavity appears natural rather than man-made, estimated 15 feet in diameter with floor sloping downward, air noticeably warmer within the cavity. The blasting had been conducted under Blackwood's direct supervision, unusual for the mine owner, who typically focused on administrative and financial matters. According to the blasting log, a larger-than-normal powder charge had been used, against the recommendation of the powder man, James Erickson. What followed was a series of measurements and geological observations. Cooper, who had some formal education in geology, seemed genuinely puzzled by the formation. Rock composition changes abruptly at cavity entrance. Unknown dark mineral embedded in walls. Samples collected for analysis. The analysis, conducted in the settlement's assay office, proved inconclusive. The assayer's notes described the mineral as dense, with unusual crystalline structure, unlike typical Montana formations. Dark gray with faint purple banding when viewed under magnification. Resists standard chemical tests. The next day's entry was brief. 4 men sent to begin exploration of cavity. Only 3 returned. Timothy Walsh missing. Remaining men report unusual echoing effects in cavity, making communication difficult. Search for Walsh continues. Walsh, age 33, had been with the Prosperity Mine for just over a year. His employment record lists previous experience in Colorado silver mines. Married with 2 children, he had been sending the majority of his wages to his family in Denver. His disappearance sparked particular concern among the miners, as he was known for his caution and reliability. According to statements from the 3 returning men, the exploration team had been mapping the cavity when Walsh stepped around a large rock formation to examine the far wall. The others heard him exclaim something unintelligible, followed by a sound described variously as rushing air or distant machinery. When they moved to his position seconds later, Walsh was gone, with no visible tunnel or crevice that could explain his disappearance. McPherson's journal from January 24th provides a different perspective. They've found something in the mountain that shouldn't be there. Matheson called it a room, but says it doesn't look man-made. Says the walls have strange patterns, almost like the entry ends abruptly, the remainder of the page torn away. The referenced Matheson was likely Andrew Matheson, whose name appears on the cavity exploration team roster. Company records show Matheson requested reassignment to surface duties the day after Walsh's disappearance. The request was denied due to staffing limitations. By the end of January, Cooper's logs document 6 missing men, all last seen in or near the northeastern tunnel. Blackwood finally ordered that section temporarily closed, moving operations to the western and southern veins while further assessment of the northeastern cavity was conducted. A report sent by Cooper to the territorial mining inspector in Helena reveals his growing scientific curiosity about the discovery. The cavity appears to expand beyond our initial estimations. Echo patterns suggest substantial additional chambers. Temperature increases noticeably as one moves deeper. Curious mineral formations, unlike anything in my 20 years of mining experience. The report requested geological expertise from Helena, but the heavy winter snows made travel impossible. It would be spring before outside assistance could reach Blackwater Gulch. February brought no relief from the cold or the growing sense of dread in the settlement. Cooper's logs detail increasing absenteeism and the first departures. 3 miners who decided to risk the winter journey rather than remain at Blackwater Gulch. These men, Jacob Harmon, Peter Clausen, and Michael Riley, left on February 3rd, according to the settlement's registry of departures. All 3 had worked primarily in the northeastern tunnel before its closure. They apparently left without collecting their final wages, unusual behavior that suggests haste or fear. No record exists of their arrival in Hamilton or any other nearby settlement. A spring survey party reported finding what might have been the remains of a campsite and possible human remains in a ravine approximately 15 miles east of Blackwater Gulch, but heavy predator activity had left little for identification. On February 8th, Cooper noted, Night watchman Peterson reports hearing machinery operating in the sealed northeastern tunnel during his rounds. Peterson relieved of duties due to suspected consumption of spirits during watch. Peterson's own statement attached to Cooper's log insists he was sober and that the sounds continued for nearly 20 minutes, a grinding and clanking like the ore carts moving, but deeper, more resonant. Peterson described the sealed entrance to the northeastern tunnel as vibrating slightly, dust falling from the support timbers with each pulse of the sound. Despite being relieved as night watchman, Peterson remained at Blackwater Gulch, returning to his previous role as a cart operator. Investigation found all equipment secure and tunnel entrance undisturbed. The company's store ledger shows he began purchasing larger quantities of whiskey, charging it against his wages. Blackwood's correspondence from this period shows a man increasingly divided between scientific curiosity and business concerns. To his brother, he wrote on February 12th, "Something remarkable has been discovered here. I've taken to examining the unusual mineral samples myself. They exhibit properties I cannot explain, seeming almost to change weight and density when held for extended periods." This letter continues with observations that grow increasingly speculative. I've conducted a series of tests using the limited equipment available to me. The mineral appears to absorb light when placed in darkness for extended periods, then release a faint luminescence when returned to light. More curiously, 2 samples placed in contact overnight appear to have partially merged by morning, their boundary becoming indistinct. To his investors, however, his February 15th letter struck a different tone. Temporary delays due to routine maintenance and assessment. Spring will bring expanded operations and, I believe, exceptional returns on your investment. The dual narrative continued throughout the month. Cooper's logs documented routine mining operations in the southern and western tunnels, while McPherson's journal entries described a settlement increasingly on edge. On February 22nd, McPherson wrote, "No one sleeps through the night anymore. We hear the mountain shifting. Some say it's just normal settling. I've worked 6 mines across 3 territories and never heard anything like it. Like something large moving behind the walls." The entry continues. Williams woke the entire north row of cabins last night, screaming about something pulling at him through the floor. Took 4 men to hold him down until he came to his senses. Doc gave him enough laudanum to quiet a horse. This morning his boots had that same twisted look as Klein's did, though Williams swears he never left his bed. The Williams incident does not appear in Cooper's official log, though the medical ledger shows a substantial laudanum dispensation on that date with the notation, "Extreme nervous agitation." The final week of February brought a temporary thaw, and with it, the first visitor to Blackwater Gulch in months, a postal rider named James Cartwright, who arrived with mail and departed the following day. His subsequent report to authorities in Hamilton provides the first outside observation of conditions at the settlement. Reached Blackwater Gulch, February 27th, Cartwright wrote. Settlement appeared in poor order, many men unshaven showing signs of poor sleep. Owner Blackwood refused mail for 3 men, stating they had moved on, though no one has come through Hamilton heading east. Residents unusually reluctant to speak with outsider. Departed February 28th with sense of relief. Cartwright's report continues with observations about the physical condition of the settlement. Several cabins appeared abandoned, with doors left open despite cold. The company store was well stocked but disorganized, with ledgers showing numerous errors and omissions. The mine entrance was heavily timbered and reinforced beyond what would be typical for winter operations. March brought warming temperatures and, according to Cooper's logs, a decision to reopen the northeastern tunnel. Blackwood orders inspection of northeastern sections beginning March 5th. Teams of 3 men each, rotating hourly. No team to proceed beyond marked boundaries without direct authorization. This decision coincided with increased pressure from investors. A telegram delivered by Cartwright demanded progress reports and projected yields for the spring quarter. Blackwood's response, preserved in his correspondence book, promised significant developments by mid-April. On March the 6th, Cooper recorded, "First inspection teams report tunnel condition stable. No sign of previous missing men or their equipment. Unusual echoing effects persist. Men report difficulty judging distances and directions within the cavity." The inspection team roster lists 9 men, divided into 3 teams. Notably, all were relatively recent hires with less connection to the missing men. Veterans of the mine, including McPherson, were assigned to the western tunnels during this period. McPherson's journal from March 7th adds, "Blackwood himself led a team into the northeast tunnel today, returned with several unusual rock samples. His hands were shaking during evening meal. Overheard him tell Cooper they need to document everything before proceeding." The entry continues. Jenkins says they found something else in there today. A boot matching the one found earlier, but looking newer, less worn, same size and make as Klein's, but without the stretching damage, as if it had been replaced. Blackwood confiscated it immediately. Jenkins likely refers to Howard Jenkins, a carpenter who had been reassigned to mining duties due to personnel shortages. No official record of this discovery appears in Cooper's log. On March 10th, the first comprehensive exploration of the cavity took place. Cooper's log provides extensive details about dimensions, air quality, and unusual geological features. He noted, main cavity extends approximately 40 feet before narrowing into tunnel-like passage. Passage appears natural rather than man-made, descending at roughly 15-degree angle. Walls contain high concentration of unknown dark mineral, increasingly prevalent as depth increases. A crude map attached to the log shows the cavity and the beginning of the passage. Measurements appear precise for the cavity itself, but become approximated and then merely estimated as the passage extends. A notation in the margin reads, "Compass readings unreliable beyond this point. Needles fluctuate wildly." The exploration team placed markers at regular intervals and withdrew after reaching a depth of approximately 100 feet beyond the main cavity. Cooper's final note for the day reads, "Further exploration tomorrow with improved lighting and measuring equipment." However, the next day's entry indicates a change of plans. Blackwood orders detailed mapping before further descent. Drawing materials and surveying equipment prepared. Teams to begin systematic documentation on March 12th. A requisition form shows unusual items ordered from the company store for this purpose. 6 additional lanterns, a surveyor's transit normally used for surface operations, and 200 feet of fine copper wire. The purpose of the wire is not specified. No log entry exists for March 12th, the first such omission in Cooper's otherwise meticulous records. The entry for March 13th is brief and written in a noticeably less steady hand. 3 men missing following survey attempt. Equipment found scattered at 100-foot marker. No signs of collapse or other natural explanation. The missing men were identified as Andrew Matheson, Howard Jenkins, and David Prescott. All 3 had been part of the previous exploration teams. Their personal effects remained in their respective cabins suggesting they had expected to return. McPherson's journal provides more emotional context. They sent 9 men in yesterday. 6 returned, shaking, unable to properly explain what happened. Cooper organized another search, but found nothing. Williams tried to leave camp this morning. Blackwood's men brought him back. We're being told it's for our own safety due to weather conditions. The weather, according to meteorological records from Hamilton, was actually mild for mid-March. The trails would have been muddy but passable. One of the returning surveyors, Benjamin Crawford, provided a statement that was attached to Cooper's log. We had reached the 100-foot marker and were preparing to continue the survey. Matheson, Jenkins, and Prescott moved ahead with the transit, while the rest of us established the baseline. We heard them talking, their voices echoing strangely. Then Matheson called back something about movement in the wall. There was a sound like rushing wind, then silence. When we moved forward with the lanterns, they were gone, all 3. The transit lay on its side, still set up on the tripod. Jenkins's notebook lay open, the last entry unfinished mid-word. Crawford's statement concludes with a personal observation. I have worked mines for 12 years. I have seen cave-ins trap men beyond recovery. This was different. There was no debris, no dust, no disturbance of any kind. It was as if they had simply stepped through the wall. Cooper's log on March 15th notes, Blackwood orders northeastern tunnel sealed until further notice. Men assigned to construct reinforced barrier at tunnel entrance. A more personal notation follows, unusual for Cooper's typically formal entries. Cannot shake the feeling that we've uncovered something best left buried. Blackwood refuses outside assistance or reporting of recent events. The construction of the barrier was completed on March 16th, according to the daily work assignment roster. The structure used timber normally reserved for main shaft support, creating a barrier described as double thick with cross bracing and iron reinforcement at all joints. The company store ledger shows an unusual requisition for 6 padlocks of the highest available quality. The following days show increasing tension within the settlement. Cooper documents arguments among the miners, an unusual fight at the company store, and 2 men placed under guard after attempting to leave without collecting their wages. These men, identified as Eric Peterson, the former night watchman, and George Sullivan, had apparently attempted to depart before dawn on March 18th. According to the incident report filed by Richard Howell, who had replaced Peterson as night watchman, the men had packed supplies for an extended journey and were carrying several samples of the unusual dark mineral. Sullivan and Peterson were confined to the company store building under guard. No further record of their status appears in the official logs, though McPherson's journal entry from March 19th notes Peterson and Sullivan still locked in the storeroom. Blackwood himself brings their meals. No one allowed to speak with them. On March 20th, Cooper wrote, "Barrier to northeastern tunnel found damaged overnight. No evidence of human tampering. Material appears compressed from tunnel side, though this should be physically impossible given the construction." A detailed inspection report notes that 4 2-inch thick support timbers showed inward compression damage, with wood fibers splayed and cracked. The damage pattern was described as consistent with extreme pressure applied from the tunnel side over a short period. The report concludes that the barrier remained structurally sound, but recommended additional reinforcement. Blackwood's letter to his brother, dated March 22nd, reveals a man struggling with his discoveries. The mineral samples continue to exhibit inexplicable properties. When stored in darkness, they develop surface patterns not present in light. Under magnification, these patterns appear almost like minute writing, though in no language I recognize. I find myself drawn to them, spending hours in examination. The letter continues more ominously. I must consider the possibility that what we've discovered is not merely an unusual geological formation. The cavity dimensions expand between measurements. The echoes sometimes precede the sounds that should cause them. Men report time passing differently within the deeper sections, watches disagreeing by hours rather than minutes. Blackwood concludes with a request that would never be fulfilled. I require proper scientific instruments and knowledgeable colleagues to properly document these phenomena. Upon receipt of this letter, please arrange for a qualified geologist, preferably Stevens from Harvard, who worked with us in Colorado, to travel to Blackwater Gulch as soon as conditions permit. Expense is no object. By the final week of March, Cooper's logs show mining operations continuing only in the shallowest, westernmost tunnels, as far from the northeastern section as possible. Blackwood had reportedly relocated his quarters to the assay office, where he conducted continuous experiments on the mineral samples. The assay office ledger shows unusual activity during this period. Standard gold testing equipment was repurposed for experiments on the dark mineral. Entries describe measurements of weight, density, and magnetic properties, with results that fluctuated inexplicably between observations. One entry dated March 26th reads, Sample A7, weight 4.2 ounces at first measurement. Same sample without apparent change or alteration, weighs 6.3 ounces 4 hours later. When placed in proximity to sample A4, combined weight exceeds individual measurements by 0.8 ounces. March 29th brings the last coherent entry in McPherson's journal. Cooper finally agrees something must be done. He and 4 others plan to leave for Hamilton tomorrow, weather permitting, to bring back authorities. Blackwood spends all hours in the assay office. Through the window, I've seen him talking to the rocks like they're answering. The entry continues. Sullivan escaped during the night. Peterson still confined. 3 more men missing since yesterday. Norton, Crawford, and Whitley. No one even bothering to search anymore. The mine is still making noise, though no one's working it. Grinding, shifting, like it's hungry. Benjamin Crawford, mentioned as missing, had been one of the survivors of the March 12th survey expedition. Norton and Whitley were identified in employment records as Charles Norton and James Whitley, both experienced miners who had worked at Blackwater Gulch for over a year. Cooper's log for March 30th reads only, Departure delayed. Northwestern tunnel shows signs of same mineral composition observed in northeastern sections. All mining operations suspended pending assessment. A brief addendum, apparently added later in the day, states, Unauthorized entry to assay office during afternoon. Several mineral samples missing. Peterson's guard reports he has not left confinement. The events of early April remain difficult to reconstruct accurately. Cooper's log contains only fragmentary entries, often undated. One reads, Men report breathing sounds from behind sealed barrier. Blackwood orders second barrier constructed 5 yards back from first. The company's store ledger shows decreasing activity, with many miners apparently confining themselves to their cabins. Food was distributed centrally rather than purchased individually, suggesting a breakdown in normal settlement operations. Another undated entry notes, Sample in assay office measured 4.3 ounces at morning weighing. Same sample measures 6.7 ounces evening weighing. No explanation. The most disturbing entry, dated simply April, states, Found Peterson back in camp this morning, claims no memory of where he's been since February. Physical appearance unchanged except for unusual dark material embedded under fingernails. Placed under observation in company store. This entry contradicts earlier logs indicating Peterson had been confined in the storeroom since March 18th. No explanation for this discrepancy appears in the available documentation. McPherson's journal contains only 2 entries for April. The first, dated April 3rd, consists of a single line, They're coming out of the mountain now. The second, dated April 7th, reads, Cooper left this morning with Erickson, Vaughn, Miller, and Howell. Blackwood didn't try to stop them, too busy with his rocks. They move when he's not looking. They move even when he is. A letter found among Blackwood's effects, apparently written but never sent, provides the last coherent account from Blackwater Gulch. Dated April 10, 1877, it reads, To whom it may concern, I, Thomas Blackwood, being of sound mind, though troubled spirit, hereby document the current situation at Prosperity Mine, Blackwater Gulch, Montana Territory. The discovery made in the northeastern tunnel appears to be expanding. What began as a cavity now comprises multiple chambers, though we have ceased direct exploration. The unusual mineral first found there has been observed in increasing concentrations throughout the mine system. Of the 27 men missing since December, none have been recovered. However, personal items belonging to these men occasionally appear in previously searched areas. Most recently, Timothy Walsh's pocket watch was found on the floor of the main entrance tunnel, ticking, though it had not been wound in months. I no longer believe we are dealing with a natural phenomenon. The mountain appears to be changing. For lack of a better description, it appears to be consuming the mine works, and I fear, the men as well. Cooper left 3 days ago with the remaining horses, seeking assistance. The 22 men still in camp grow increasingly agitated. I have ordered the sealing of the mine entrance completely, though I suspect this will only delay the inevitable. Should anyone find this account, I advise the permanent abandonment of this site and destruction of all mineral samples removed from it. Some discoveries are warnings rather than opportunities. Thomas Blackwood, mine owner. A final notation appears below the signature, written in a shakier hand. April 13th. It speaks to me now through the samples. Offers knowledge beyond imagining. I begin to understand why the men were necessary. A fair exchange, perhaps. I shall test its limits tonight. No further primary documents from Blackwater Gulch have been discovered. What is known comes from subsequent investigations. On April 18, 1877, William Cooper arrived alone in Hamilton, Montana. According to the statement he gave to local authorities, he had left Blackwater Gulch on April 7th with 4 other men. The others had separated from him during a severe snowstorm 2 days into the journey. Cooper appeared severely malnourished and was initially diagnosed with mountain fever and exhaustion. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Thornton, noted in his medical report, patient exhibits symptoms of severe exhaustion and exposure, with frostbite to extremities and signs of malnutrition. More concerning are the psychological symptoms: extreme agitation when discussing recent experiences, refusal to sleep without illumination, and persistent tremors when questioned about specific events at the mining settlement. Once recovered sufficiently to provide a coherent account, Cooper described increasingly strange occurrences at the mine, including the disappearances. However, his account focused primarily on geological abnormalities rather than any suggestion of supernatural events. He requested a formal investigation and recovery mission. The transcribed interview, conducted by Sheriff James McAllister on April 25th, contains notable discrepancies when compared with the documentary evidence later recovered from the site. Cooper made no mention of the unusual properties of the mineral samples described in Blackwood's correspondence. He attributed the disappearances to dangerous and unexplored natural cavities within the mountain. When specifically questioned about Blackwood's activities in the weeks before Cooper's departure, Cooper claimed the mine owner had been focused on recovery efforts and maintaining order. This contradicts both McPherson's journal entries and Blackwood's own letter describing his obsession with the mineral samples. Due to spring flooding, the expedition to Blackwater Gulch was delayed until May 12th. Cooper led a party including 2 U.S. Marshals, a doctor, and 3 experienced guides back to the settlement. They found Blackwater Gulch completely abandoned. The mine entrance had been sealed with a substantial timber barrier. The assay office contained numerous mineral samples and Blackwood's journal, which ended abruptly on April 13th with a single line, "The walls move when no one is watching." The expedition's official report, filed by Marshal Robert Tanner on May 20th, 1877, provides a clinical description of the scene. Settlement consists of approximately 40 structures, including miners' cabins, administrative buildings, and support facilities. All buildings were found unoccupied but largely intact. Personal belongings remained in most dwellings, suggesting hasty departure or intent to return. No human remains were discovered despite thorough search of settlement and immediate surroundings. The report notes specific anomalies. Mine entrance reinforced with extensive timber bracing and sealed with double barrier. Inner barrier shows significant inward compression damage. Company office found in disarray with safe open and empty. Unusual mineral samples present in assay office alongside incomplete experimental records. Dr. Thornton, who accompanied the expedition, collected several of these mineral samples for further analysis. His initial field notes describe them as dense dark gray material with purple banding when viewed in proper light, unusually heavy for size. Surface exhibits fine patterns visible under magnification. The settlement showed no signs of violence or hasty departure. Meals had been left half-eaten on tables. Personal belongings remained in cabins. The company's safe in Blackwood's office stood open and empty. No bodies were discovered despite extensive searching of the surrounding area. The investigating marshals documented the scene meticulously but offered no conclusions in their official report. Cooper, upon returning to the abandoned settlement, reportedly refused to remain overnight and insisted on making camp several miles away from the mine entrance. According to Marshal Tanner's personal diary, discovered among his effects after his death in 1902, Cooper's behavior during the expedition was increasingly erratic. Cooper refuses to approach the mine entrance or enter the assay office. When questioned about the mineral samples, he becomes agitated, insisting they be left untouched. Today he attempted to destroy several specimens by throwing them into the creek, claiming they shouldn't be removed from this place. Dr. Thornton has secured his samples in sealed containers. The diary entry concludes, something deeply unsettling about this place. Men restless at night, reporting unusual dreams. Guide Mitchell claims to have seen movement within the sealed mine entrance during his watch, though the barrier remained intact. Will complete documentation tomorrow and depart by midday. The expedition collected Blackwood's journals and mineral samples for further study. These materials were transported to Helena and eventually transferred to the Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C. in August 1877. Dr. Thornton's analysis of the mineral samples submitted to the Territorial Geological Survey on June 15, 1877, reports several anomalies. Specimens resist standard classification. Composition includes elements consistent with quartz and feldspar, but in configurations not previously documented. Most notable is variable density under identical measurement conditions, with fluctuations of up to 40% observed over a 24-hour period. The report concludes with a recommendation: further study warranted under controlled conditions by qualified mineralogists. Samples temporarily stored at Territorial Assay Office pending transfer to Department of Interior facilities. A subsequent note, added by a different hand, states simply, samples transferred to federal custody per directive dated July 10, 1877, case file sealed by executive order. On October 3, 1877, a brief note from the Department of the Interior to the Montana Territorial Governor ordered the immediate sealing of the Prosperity Mine entrance by government contractors. The note classified all information regarding Blackwater Gulch as sensitive material not for public distribution. The contractor's work order, preserved in territorial records, specified permanent sealing using reinforced concrete to a minimum depth of 20 feet, with additional timber reinforcement and surrounding area to be designated as restricted. The work was completed by November 1877, according to payment vouchers issued to the contracting company. By 1879, Blackwater Gulch had been removed from territorial maps. The settlement's buildings were later salvaged for lumber or left to decay. The area was incorporated into national forest lands in the early 20th century, its history largely forgotten. Of the approximately 50 men who were present at Blackwater Gulch in April 1877, only William Cooper is known to have survived. No record exists of Thomas Blackwood or the other miners ever being seen again. Missing persons reports filed by relatives of several miners were reportedly directed to the Department of the Interior and subsequently closed without resolution. William Cooper never returned to mining. He purchased a small farm near Missoula and lived there until his death in 1901. His obituary makes no mention of his time at Blackwater Gulch. According to local accounts, he refused to discuss the subject, even with family members. A statement from Cooper's daughter, recorded by a local historian in 1932, describes her father as troubled by nightmares throughout his life. He slept with lanterns lit around his bed and could not bear to enter caves or cellars. When pressed about his experiences before coming to Missoula, he would only say that some things in this world should be left alone. The mineral samples and documents collected from the site apparently remained in federal storage until 1922, when a fire in a Washington record facility destroyed numerous classified materials from the territorial period. No official record of their existence appears after this date. However, rumors within geological circles suggest some samples may have been transferred to a private research facility prior to the fire. An internal memo from the U.S. Geological Survey, dated 1915, references anomalous mineral specimens from Montana source M1877 being subject to ongoing classification efforts at an unspecified location. In 1938, a civilian Conservation Corps team building fire breaks in the Bitterroot National Forest reportedly discovered the sealed mine entrance. Their supervisor, after consulting unnamed government records, ordered the area marked as unstable ground and rerouted the project. A worker on this team, Harold Jenkins, later described the site in a local newspaper interview. We found what looked like an old mine entrance but sealed up proper with concrete that had weathered some but was still solid. What was odd was how the trees grew around it, or rather didn't grow. There was a circle, maybe 30 yards across, where nothing tall would grow, just scrub brush and such. The supervisor got real serious when we reported it, made us promise not to mark it on our maps. The most recent documented interaction with the Blackwater Gulch site occurred in 1957, when historian Margaret Holloway attempted to locate the mine as part of her research into Montana's mining history. Her field notes, preserved in the University of Montana archives, describe finding what appeared to be the collapsed remains of several small structures and a sealed mine entrance. Holloway wrote, "The site corresponds to the coordinates indicated in territorial records for Blackwater Gulch, though no identifying markers remain. The mine entrance has been professionally sealed with concrete dating to the early 20th century, based on composition. Forest Service markers indicate geological instability, though no evidence of recent slides or subsidence is apparent." She collected several rock samples from the area, noting unusual dark mineral inclusions similar to those described in Cooper's logs. These samples were stored at the university's geology department, but were reportedly lost during a reorganization of the collection in 1963. Holloway's field notes contain additional observations not included in her published work. The area surrounding the sealed mine entrance exhibits unusual properties. Compass readings fluctuate unpredictably within approximately 50 yards of the entrance. Electronic equipment, including my tape recorder, experiences power failures despite fresh batteries. Most striking is the unnatural silence, no bird sounds or wildlife activity detected during 8-hour observation period. Holloway's subsequent research into the Blackwater incident was published in the Journal of Western History in 1959. The article focused primarily on the economic aspects of the failed mining venture, making only passing reference to the unusual circumstances of its abandonment. She attributed the disappearances to harsh conditions and possible criminal activity. In a private letter to a colleague, however, Holloway expressed deeper concerns. "The more I learn about Blackwater Gulch, the less I wish to know. The federal response seems disproportionate to a simple mine failure. Archives that should contain relevant documents show signs of deliberate removal. My inquiries to the Department of the Interior have been met with bureaucratic obstruction." The letter continues with a personal admission. "I must confess that since returning from the site, I have experienced troubling dreams, dark passages that shift and change as I move through them, and voices that echo before I speak. More concerning, the rock samples I collected appear to have changed in appearance since my return, developing fine linear patterns not present during initial examination. Holloway's academic focus shifted to agricultural history shortly after the publication of her article. She never returned to the subject of Blackwater Gulch. In 1965, a graduate student named Robert Patterson attempted to expand on Holloway's research as part of his doctoral dissertation on mining economics in territorial Montana. His request to access the original Blackwater Gulch documents was denied by the Department of the Interior, citing ongoing classification review. Patterson's correspondence with Holloway, preserved in her personal papers, reveals her reluctance to revisit the subject. I would strongly advise focusing your research elsewhere. The Blackwater case presents unusual obstacles, both administrative and otherwise. Some historical questions are perhaps best left unanswered. In 1968, a geological survey team from the University of Montana conducted a broader assessment of the Bitterroot Range. Their equipment detected what appeared to be an extensive cave system in the vicinity of the former Blackwater Gulch. However, the team's request to explore the area was denied by Forest Service officials, citing safety concerns. The team leader, Dr. Robert Isaacson, later remarked in a departmental memo, "The density readings from the Blackwater area exceed normal parameters for the known rock types in the region. Something unusual is definitely present in the geological composition." Dr. Isaacson's formal report omits any reference to these anomalies, focusing instead on standard geological features of the surrounding area. When questioned about this omission by a colleague, Isaacson reportedly replied, "Some things don't belong in official reports. Trust me on this." No further official investigations have been conducted. The area remains part of the Bitterroot National Forest, unmarked on public maps except as general backcountry. Forest Service internal maps reportedly still carry the unstable ground designation for the site. A former Forest Service ranger, speaking anonymously to a local historian in 1982, claimed that the area surrounding the old mine site was subject to special monitoring protocols. "We had standing orders to report any unusual activity or unauthorized persons in that sector immediately to the regional office. Trail maintenance crews were instructed to avoid the area entirely. New rangers weren't told why, just that it was unstable and dangerous." Occasionally, hikers in the region report unusual phenomena: watches that run backward, compasses that spin without settling, unexplained feelings of being watched. These accounts rarely make it beyond local conversation or obscure internet forums. A backpacker's report from 1992 describes a perfect circle of stunted vegetation in a remote valley of the Bitterroot Range, with air that felt somehow thicker, resistant to movement. The backpacker reported developing unusually vivid nightmares after camping nearby, featuring dark passages that seemed to breathe. In 1996, a backpacker claimed to have found a pocket watch engraved with the initials TW near what he believed to be the old Blackwater site. When he returned with others to locate the area again, he was reportedly unable to find the same valley configuration, despite using GPS coordinates. The watch itself disappeared from his home in Missoula 3 weeks later. Local police attributed it to routine burglary, though nothing else was taken. A more recent incident occurred in 2003, when a geology student conducting independent research reported finding unusual dark mineral deposits in a remote area of the Bitterroot Range. Samples she collected reportedly exhibited shifting weight measurements and developed fine linear patterns when stored in darkness. The student's academic advisor discouraged further investigation, citing potential contamination of samples with industrial pollutants. The student's field notebook, shared on an obscure geology forum before being deleted, contained the disturbing observation: the patterns look almost like writing or circuit diagrams, or both. They change slightly each time I examine them, as if responding to observation. Last night I dreamed they were trying to communicate something. Forest Service records show an unusually high number of missing persons reports in the broader Bitterroot region, compared to similar wilderness areas, though no official connection to the Blackwater site has been established. Most cases are attributed to routine wilderness accidents, wildlife encounters, or hikers becoming disoriented. What truly happened at Blackwater Gulch in the winter and spring of 1877? The official records offer only fragments. The disappearance of 27 men remains unexplained. The unusual mineral described in multiple accounts has never been formally classified by modern geology. Thomas Blackwood's final warning that some discoveries are warnings rather than opportunities echoes with particular resonance given subsequent events. The federal government's swift action to seal the mine and classify related information suggests recognition of something beyond ordinary mining hazards. Perhaps most telling is William Cooper's lifelong silence about the events he witnessed. A man who survived whatever occurred at Blackwater Gulch, who lived nearly 25 years afterward, chose never to speak of it again. The mountains of western Montana hold many secrets. Abandoned mines dot the landscape, monuments to ambition and disappointment. Most represent nothing more than the boom and bust cycle of frontier economics. But deep in the Bitterroot Range, sealed behind concrete and nearly a century and a half of deliberate forgetting, something else may wait. Something that, in Thomas Blackwood's words, was best left buried. Something that might yet be breathing, slowly, behind walls that move when no one is watching. For those interested in visiting the Bitterroot National Forest, the specific coordinates of Blackwater Gulch no longer appear on any public maps. Perhaps that is for the best. Some places, like some stories, are safer kept at a distance. The dark mineral samples collected in 1877 may have been destroyed in the Washington Fire of 1922, or perhaps they rest in some government archive, still slowly changing their weight and developing patterns in the darkness. And perhaps, in the deepest night, they whisper to their keepers as they once whispered to Thomas Blackwood, offering secrets from inside a mountain that hungers. In 2015, a retired Forest Service employee came forward with a curious story about an incident in 1987. While updating boundary markers deep in the Bitterroot Range, his team discovered what appeared to be an old mining tool, a pickaxe with a weathered wooden handle embedded in a tree trunk approximately 15 feet above ground level. The tool was oriented horizontally, as if placed there deliberately, though the tree had clearly grown around it over many decades. The strange thing, the employee recalled, was that the metal head still looked almost new, no rust, still sharp, and there were markings on it, not a manufacturer's stamp, but fine lines that almost looked like writing in some language none of us recognized. The team's supervisor reportedly confiscated the tool and instructed the men not to include it in their field report. When questioned about its unusual position high in the tree, the supervisor suggested it had probably been placed there during a period of deep snow and subsequently forgotten. The retired employee, however, noted that the area where they found the tool matched old descriptions of Blackwater Gulch's location. I looked into it a bit after we got back, reading old reports and such. Never could shake the feeling that we'd found something we weren't supposed to find. He claimed that several team members experienced unusual dreams in the weeks following the discovery. Dreams featuring dark tunnels with walls that seemed to shift and move, and distant voices that echoed before words were spoken. Whether this account represents an actual encounter with artifacts from Blackwater Gulch, or simply the way local legends accrete additional details over time, remains unclear. What is certain is that the story of the mountain that swallowed its workers alive continues to resonate through Montana's mining history, a dark counterpoint to tales of frontier prosperity and discovery. For historians and geologists alike, the Blackwater incident remains an anomaly, a case where the official explanation seems inadequate, yet alternative explanations venture into territory most academics are reluctant to explore. The territorial records contain dozens of accounts of abandoned mines and lost settlements, but none with the peculiar pattern of disappearances and federal involvement that characterizes Blackwater Gulch. If the dark mineral that so fascinated Thomas Blackwood represented some previously unknown geological formation, it has never been properly classified or studied by modern science. If the disappearances resulted from criminal activity or some natural disaster, no evidence has ever emerged to support such theories. What remains is a mystery sealed in concrete and bureaucracy, a story of men who ventured too deep into a mountain and found something that defied conventional understanding. In the words of Margaret Holloway, some historical questions are perhaps best left unanswered. Yet for those drawn to the darker corners of history, the question persists. What waits behind the sealed entrance of the Prosperity Mine? What caused 27 men to vanish without trace? What secret was valuable enough to warrant federal intervention and ongoing classification? And perhaps most disturbingly, if something within that mountain was capable of consuming the mine works and the men who operated them, as Blackwood's final letter suggested, does it remain there still, waiting behind walls that move when no one is watching? The Bitterroot Mountains stand silent on these questions, revealing nothing of what may lie within their depths. The forest has reclaimed what remains of Blackwater Gulch, covering the scars of human ambition with new growth. To casual observers, nothing distinguishes the site from the surrounding wilderness. But perhaps, if one were to stand in that remote valley on a still night, one might hear what William Cooper and Thomas Blackwood heard, the sound of something breathing behind stone, the echo that precedes the sound, the whisper of a mountain that hungers. For now, the case remains cold, the evidence fragmentary, the truth buried beneath concrete and classification. The Blackwater incident joins the long list of frontier mysteries, stories that remind us that the American West was not merely conquered by human determination, but sometimes pushed back in ways that defy explanation. And somewhere in the Bitterroot Range, a sealed mine entrance stands as silent testimony to the proposition that some discoveries are indeed warnings rather than opportunities, and some doors, once opened, cannot truly be closed again